Well, as my tag says, we are still 12 Saturdays away from real games, but the storylines are heating up. Preview season is almost here, and we got a treasure trove of EA college football information today. We're going to talk about all that and more right here on the Three Technique.
One man. Goodbye. Hello, Heisman.
20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. No, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Well, welcome in everybody to another episode of the Three Technique, the college football podcast at the intersection of the X's and O's and Jimmy's and Joe's. I'm Trey Reeves. I'm joined by Garrett Turney. Garrett, you guys survived softball-size hail this week. We all good up there?
Yeah, we're okay. We missed it. I said this. We missed it by a couple of exits on the freeway. The heaviest stuff missed us a little bit. We got pelted by a bunch of like golf ball stuff, and somehow my Ford truck windshield didn't shatter. So praise Jesus on that one. Thank the Lord that didn't happen. But no, I mean it all made up for it because what my conspiracy is that the city of the city of Minneapolis is doing this to kind of get back at Dallas for what we're doing to the Timberwolves. And I'm just really enjoying, having a little bit of, DFW sports supremacy right now. We got World Series champion Texas Rangers. They're defending. We got the pennant up there, right? We got the Mavs up 3-1, purposefully throwing a game to get Lively back on the court, because he's a little injured too. We got the Stars that are doing Stars things right now. They went up 2-0. And then they just, gave up 2 in like 2 minutes. So like, it's fine. It's whatever. But, we got, good times here for all of the important, I don't think I'm missing a team in DFW. I'm trying to think if there's another important franchise up here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. We're just enjoying some DFW supremacy right now, trying to go on a couple title hunts. And, the hail is the only thing that could really bring us down.
Well, the football team in Arlington won a championship last year.
They did. Yeah. The Roughnecks. Yeah.
The Roughnecks, exactly. So, no, there's a lot of college football fans in the DFW Metroplex, and they've had a fantastic time waiting out this offseason. Maybe the rest of us have not had as fantastic of a time. We do still have 12 more Saturdays, as I mentioned off the top, till week 0. Garrett, tonight, ironically, we are 3 months away from opening night Thursday Night Football for the opening week of the season. So our first full weekend of games will start 3 months from today. It cannot go by fast enough. We are ready to start preview season. We got a ton of content coming down the pipe, and it's all brought to you by our friends at Home Field Apparel. Guys, tons of fun stuff happening at Home Field Apparel. They've got the baseball releases that came out a couple weeks ago. Garrett, I don't know if you saw this, but they have a subscription box for 7 very fun mascots. You can get a discounted t-shirt, all 7, $20 a t-shirt. Guys, that's cheaper than you can get at most stores if you sign up for the subscription box. And you're getting things like the Delta State Fighting Okra, the UC Santa Cruz Banana Slugs, the UTSA Roadrunners for a little bit more local flair here in Texas. A lot of fun schools. 7 t-shirts, $20 a shirt. You get one sent to you once a week. A fun random design for those programs that they're either launching for the first time or refreshing. So check out our friends at We Are the Three Technique. Check out our friends at Home Field and use our code 3TechPod at checkout for 15% off your first order, or the link in our Twitter bio for 15% off a returning order. Yeah, we couldn't do without our friends at Home Field. And throughout the summer, we're going to be having a lot less time, just idle college football time, because of course, EA college football is now less than 2 months away. Today, May 29th, as we're recording this, we had a treasure trove of information come out. There's a big exclusive meeting in Orlando, Florida, this weekend. It was a who's who of college football content creators. I think our invitation must have gotten lost in the mail. I'm not really sure. Probably a mix up with the three of our addresses.
They just didn't know which one to send it to. So I think it just got a little turned around. Yeah.
Probably got a combination of our three addresses somehow. It just got returned to sender. So we'll forgive them for that. Our invitation was lost in the mail. But it was a who's who of college football content creators. Andy Staples, Chris Vanini of The Athletic, a lot of the guys that have been hyping up EA college football on Twitter for the past decade that we haven't had a game have been were able to go to Orlando, Florida, and they were given somewhere between 5 and 6 hours of access. There were presentations on the game. There was 3 hours of gameplay that they got to actually play the college football game and Madden coming out this year, kind of back to back. And we got a ton of information out of these presentations. Garrett, I don't know about you, but I walked away just even more excited about this game because a lot of my fears were kind of spoken away by this real actual gameplay. And there were some things that I wasn't even expecting that came out of this as well.
Oh, for sure. And there were so many good things. I do want to, for a second, just go ahead and rest in peace to the mascot mode. And me and the other mascot mode fans, we're going to go, storm some castles or, I don't know, sign a petition. There are dozens of us. Okay. So we'll get out there.
No more high school football on Road to Glory.
Yeah,
that was a bummer. We'll start with the bummers, but
yeah. And look, it wasn't going to be perfect. We'll see what happens. Maybe this is a late patch or a DLC or something like that. EA loves their DLCs, so we'll see. Maybe they add mascot mode as a DLC later. But there were so many things that when I was reading through this pre-show and we're kind of going through these articles and talking about it, man, like there's so many things to be optimistic about. I think that it's going to take a lot of the guesswork out of it. You're going to actually have to know like how to play the game, understand the mechanics, and once you get the mechanics down and once you actually acquire some skill, it's going to be a lot more than just punching a couple buttons or just like hold down B to press to the go to the guy in the flat or something like that. You're going to actually have to like figure out how long to hold the button to put some feel on it, figure out how to run behind your blockers, like actually learn a little bit about the game of football to be good at this. And so I'm excited to see kind of what all this ends up looking like myself. And then, obviously we'll see kind of what's good, what's bad, what's maybe overhyped as we go out. But man, I think there are a lot of things that you could say. And obviously within, anything online, negative press is going to get you more clicks. And the fact that we got nothing but positives pretty much tells me that we should be excited about this game.
Yeah, maybe I missed it, or maybe they were instructed to only report the positive things as a condition of getting to go. But you're right. It was rave reviews from these people that got to go to Orlando and play the game. And yeah, I walked away thinking this is going to be maybe the most realistic football game, maybe sports game of all time. Just from the gameplay itself to the dynasty mode that we'll talk about in just a little bit, some more insights we got on that. But listening to Andy Staples, who himself was, a walk-on offensive lineman at Florida, one of the guys I really trust on the X's and O's aspect of things because, he played it. He was an SEC offensive lineman. He was blown away by how intelligent the AI was on the blocking scheme, that it was individualized for each player. There were some blown assignments that you have to reckon with. You can adjust the coverages and you can slide protection to one side. If there's, a really good defensive end on the defense that you're facing, you can slide protection. The hot routes are more smart now. You can tell a receiver exactly where you want them to cut in downfield. It's amazing. And like you said, like you mentioned, Garrett, it's going to take some skill. I'm guilty of playing defense by just spamming the hit stick on NCAA 14. And NCAA 14 didn't really punish that as much as, they advertised that they might. You got a lot of turnovers that way. From the sounds of it, it sounds like that's not going to be the case anymore. And also, praise the Lord, I think it was Chris Vanini that actually typed this out. But if you're concerned about the linebackers jumping 20 feet up in the air to pick off your routes, rest assured, we've been informed that is no longer the case. And you're not going to have the big 6'5", 250-pound linebacker going stride for stride with the slot receiver that you thought you created a mismatch for either. So very realistic gameplay. The passing is going to be revamped. A lot more finesse you can put on the football. The running game is going to reward you for hitting the actual holes and finding your following your blockers. You might be able to fall forward for 6 or 7 yards if you hit the right hole rather than just plunging right up the middle, spamming the sprint button. So a lot more finesse in the actual gameplay. And Garrett, the realism doesn't just stop there. Dynasty mode. I am even more excited about this now with the updates we got. We have transfer portal. Love it or hate it, it's part of the game. And you're going to be able to recruit guys much more realistically than you were in NCAA 14. If you think back 10 years ago, and this kind of mirrored what it was actually like. There weren't as many transfers back then, obviously, but you went through your recruiting process, you got through the end of the season, and then it was like, oh, maybe 1 or 2 guys ask you if they can come join your team. It's almost like a walk-on situation. You're not recruiting them. It's just kind of a luck of the draw and a simulation if your program is attractive to that. But now we're going to have an actual transfer portal. You might lose your starting quarterback that you recruited and found a diamond in the rough recruit, especially if you're at a lower school, and you're going to have to build your school's brand to take into account the brand recognition, the brand aspect of it. They're not going to put actual NIL, and I think they were smart because they actually said that's just changing too fast, right? It changes every single day. So a lot of intricacies in this dynasty mode. What did you think of that? Were you as excited as I was?
Yeah, I think when I was looking at Dynasty mode, I was really looking to see a couple of things. Really, it was just how are they going to integrate the modern game with it? Because I mean, obviously, is it hard to build out schedules and speculate at what might happen? No, it's fairly easy to do that. So I was like, okay, well, how do they deal with the transfer portal and NIL? And kind of like what you were saying, I thought it was nice to leave NIL kind of out of it because again, who knows what's going to happen? It could already be dated by the time it comes out because some lawsuit comes out.
Right.
Now, all of a sudden, NIL doesn't work the same way, or like what we're going to talk about later with rev sharing, NIL could be a whole other thing in addition to this whole rev sharing model by the time the game comes out. And so, because we have to think about that, it's nice to leave it out. But because the transfer portal's been around for several cycles now, and we kind of have an idea of how that works, for better or worse, it's nice to be able to play the transfer portal similarly to how you can play recruiting. It's going to give you a lot more to do. It's going to take a lot more skill to kind of do the day-to-day management. Hopefully it helps the casual player appreciate their coaches a little bit more for whatever team they root for, because now they're going to go, oh my gosh, I can't even handle. How do you keep up with practices? And we got to do a game, and we got a media outlet coming in and interview, but then we got this kid coming in, and if I don't promise this kid this, we're going to lose him. And oh man, and they're hopefully between roster management, transfer portal, recruiting, and the not NIL but the brand stuff, hopefully between all of that, they'll have a little bit of appreciation for what their coaches have to go through on a day-to-day basis in this sport now. So I'm optimistic about that. And, I think that's a big part of what the gameplay is. In addition to obviously so many of the mechanics changing, which I think will ultimately be for the better and force you to reward certain styles of play and certain types of gameplay.
I hadn't even thought about the appreciation aspect. That's such a good point. Some sociologist needs to come in and do a study on like message board meltdowns, fire the coach threads over the last 10 years versus 2024.
Well, and how about hopefully maybe an added perk at some point in the future is AI message board stuff where whatever you do in your game, there's an AI that models it, and now you get to go get the message boards, straight to your phone. So, you're sitting there and you're, trying to talk with a kid on the phone, or you're sending a text or something like that. And then all of a sudden you just get a little notification like, this coach sucks. He's awful, man. Why did we ever hire this bum? Right. And it would just kind of be funny to have that as a feature in the game at some point where, you're getting berated for losing games the same way that coaches did. And, you can kind of feel some of that heat the same way they do.
Yeah. And it takes a mental toll on you at some point that you're like losing some sort of mental meter, and you got to go to Cabo or go play around a golf with Kirby Smart and Nick Saban to kind of pick up.
You're like, I won 3 championships here, but I lost a game to another team that also won a championship, and now my fan base wants to fire me.
The realism, though, I think is the main takeaway
Yeah.
here. But Dynasty mode, I didn't even mention this off the top, but there's within a game, you can only take so many hard hits with one player. So, the days of running your same running back 40 times because it's working, not going to happen because there's going to be even body part specific injuries that
Yeah.
take some people have even said in game it took the overall rating of the player down. So they're getting that
Wow.
sophisticated. Like running back gets a thigh contusion or a sprained ankle or something. He's no longer an 89 overall player. He's now a 65 overall player. And you
Right.
have to decide not just re-injury risk, but is he going to actually help your team when he's out there?
And this is something I wanted to bring up too. I want to throw some massive compliments to the team at EA that did this, because this is not a typical EA move. As a guy who's played several games across several genres from EA, they do not think about player experience or like the kind of internal logic very frequently. They're kind of a DLC factory, and they just kind of like to do that and hold on to rights and then go slow. And they're like, "Ooh, look, cool graphics." But that's kind of what EA tends to do, at least in more recent years with some of the games that I've played. Man, like I am just so thrilled that they actually thought this stuff out, right? So like we're thinking about run game in previous games, you wouldn't think too much about run game. You just, power flex and ISO and counter and whatever. And you start to throw some of those out there, and it's just like, which hole do I want to run through technically? And then you just got to hope that the O line opens up enough of a hole and you can get to the second level. But to actually be able to reward thinking about it, seeing the holes, reacting, going fast, going slow, throwing a stiff arm, whatever it is, to be able to reward that and then not just abuse that system either, but say like, hey, you might want to sub a running back out for a spell and see if there's this new guy that can come in and help out. And also, like, on the injury front, the fact that it will get specific with it and not just, well, my guy ran 15 times and at time number 16 they just decided he was hurt now, and so he just got unspecified injury from getting tackled in the open. Like, there's just something about that feels more realistic.
It's always the worst one that popped up
Right.
on episode 14.
Oh yeah, no, it's just atrocious. But it's that kind of attention to detail that I think most EA teams don't typically put in. But I want to put massive props to this team, because they did a really good job making sure that we were going to get a product that made sense to us, and that I think a lot of us are going to get frustrated playing it the first couple weeks, because we're going to realize, oh crap, this is actually kind of hard. Like, I didn't realize that you actually had to think about a play call here, and you can't just memorize 5 or 6 of them and where they are in your playbook and just rotate between those because you like them the most. You're going to actually have to think about the down and distance, think about the situation, think about who's hurt, who's maybe a little bit worn down, who's maybe doing a little bit better, and actually think about what you're doing on offense, and then vice versa on defense, what to do to kind of combat, counteract, and everything else. I think it's going to be a lot better, and I think we're going to enjoy the product a lot more.
It was a labor of love for these guys, and I think that's what came through the most. The two guys that are over this project for EA are a massive Florida State and Penn State fans, and it shows through with what we've seen so far. They had to do 134 teams, and they committed to making something unique for all 134 teams. Unique stadiums, unique entrances, unique songs. They have the freaking Blue Devils marching band, not Duke, like the DCI Blue Devils marching band recording neck for LSU games, and all kinds of other unique marching band songs.
The greatest rendition of neck we've ever had.
Yeah, if you're not a marching band nerd, go YouTube the Blue Devils DCI performances.
They're very good.
They're like, I don't even know. They're like the Alabama under Nick Saban of marching.
They truly are.
So that attention to detail, that passion that they're putting into it, I walked away from all this information today thinking we probably could have gotten a game last summer, but they did not want to put an inferior product out there. They care. The people at EA that are over this project care so much about it and are so invested in it and making it the best it can be. They know that every single player, every team on this game is someone that's playing its favorite team, right? They don't want to disappoint the freaking Kennesaw State fans that are going to be playing this. They want it to be a unique experience for even those teams. I'm so excited to play this. I think my first day might just be playing a quarter at as many stadiums as I can, just playing a
Yeah.
quarter, seeing all the unique crowd shots, the picture in picture that we've seen talked about,
Yeah.
and just kind of going from there. I might not even start a dynasty for a couple days. I might just take it all in.
Right. And I mean, that's the big thing is they wanted to make sure that the fan experience, again, they're thinking about the fan experience. If you're a fan of a smaller school, you shouldn't get bumped just because your school's smaller. Like, you still care about your school. You're still a passionate fan base, right? There's things that we all love about the game, and it's not the game itself or, oh, I just love college football. We love college football because it's our team going out there to compete, and we like the traditions and we like the stuff about our school that makes us different. And that's, I think, what's going to shine through in all of this. And I really appreciate that because, yeah, it'd be really easy to just ignore that or throw a bunch of just kind of, casual uniforms in. And, well, we got the colors right. And we know that you wear like a red shirt and white pants. So, like, don't worry about it, Alabama fans. We got you. And so you could do that very easily. But instead, they said, like, okay, for every single team, I don't care if you're big school, small school, like, hey, if you're Akron, there's still a couple thousand people go to Akron, right? And you got, enough alumni that, hey, if you want to go and sell your game to Akron fans, they're actually going to get something that they want out of their team and out of their school, their whole experience. And so I'm really excited about where this game is going. I think this is a lot of good news. I will continue to just say that I'm still disappointed in no mascot mode, but that'll be just a personal gripe I have throughout the summer. And every time we talk about how great it is, I'll say, how hard would it have been to just reskin some of these players and give them a generic mascot and whatever, right? This would be so easy to do. They just didn't do it. It's fine. I'm fine. Whatever, EA.
Well, if that's the biggest complaint we have, I think we're in a good spot.
Yeah,
And
you're probably right.
I can't wait to play this game. We're going to have so much more content about EA College Football 25. Make sure that you are liked and subscribed on the channel, on the podcast, following us on Twitter and Instagram at 3TechPod so that you can stay up to date. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back with another hot topic that Garrett and Mitch tackled a little bit last time, but we got a little bit more clarity on it. We'll be talking NCAA revenue sharing next. Well, we're back, and our second segment is brought to you by Baller Pickleball. Some of the best pickleball paddles on the market, high quality materials, low price, a great paddle for any level pickleball player. Come join the fastest growing sport in America and give yourself an edge with a Baller Pickleball paddle. Use code 3TechPod at ballerpickleball.com to get 10% off your entire order. It's BALLR pickleball.com, code 3TechPod. Well, Garrett, the EA college football game was a great distraction today. All this news dump was great. There's some bigger stories that are still out there, and a lot is still circulating regarding revenue sharing. So since we last published an episode, Garrett and Mitch did a fantastic job last week. I was out, but they did a fantastic job kind of summarizing what this might look like. There were some rumors floating around about settlements and what conferences would approve them and what was going to happen. Now we have a lot of clarity because all of the power conferences, the Power Four plus the still Pac-12, they still get a vote at this table, Oregon State and Washington State. They voted to approve this settlement, and the settlement means that up to 22% of each school's revenue each year, which equates to about $21 to $22 million annually, will be shared with athletes. And that settlement also includes the $2.8 billion billion that has been thrown around in damages to past athletes that could not profit from NIL. I think this is inevitable at this point. We had crossed so many bridges. I mean, shoot, Garrett, South Park called this in 2011 with Cartman going to the I've seen that meme going around so much on Twitter. It's so appropriate. I went back and watched that episode of South Park, and it was 13 years ago that they called this. And the joke, if you haven't seen it, is that Cartman goes into a college and dressed as this, I'm sure it wouldn't fly today, but he's dressed as an old Southern gentleman with all the implications of that. And just jokes that, wow, this athletic director is getting away with slavery. And now I don't know that I would go that far. Obviously, South Park takes things completely far, but
Right.
the implication is there that these guys were not getting a cut of the billions of dollars that were being made. And now there's been, with the NCAA going just over $1 million in court, there's now a way for this revenue sharing to take place. We've talked a lot about this, Garrett, but my question, pretty simple. Now what?
Yeah, and that's kind of some of the stuff that we tried to figure out last week when we were doing the kind of initial breakdown. And this, obviously, there's a final decision. Yeah, we're going to do this, which is nice, and it kind of kicks the ball a little bit further down the field for the NCAA. I think the biggest problem is just that there's so much that they're going to have to fix and so much they're going to have to figure out. Number one, if you're smaller conferences, and this is one of the kickers from last week that we talked about, if you're a smaller conference, you're actually going to end up paying a little bit more than your fair share to these, this massive sort of sharing system with the NCAA. And that's going to be a problem because there's, schools and there's, conferences. Like I think we talked about even like the Big East, that like the Big East is not going to keep up in this model. There's no way that they could possibly keep up trying to share all this revenue when their entire revenue comes from like one basketball tournament, right? And it's a great basketball tournament. It's a lot of fun to watch, and it's, insane TV, but that's not enough revenue to share with all your schools, to share with the NCAA, to kick back to all your players and everything else. And it's just going to be a problem. The other massive issue when you look at this whole thing is just, well, how do you split it, right? You can pay some of this and kind of, use school discretion as to who gets what, but I mean, are you going to be paying every single athlete evenly? That's not going to help you keep up in some of the more revenue-driven sports like football, basketball. But if you don't pay people evenly, all of your other athletic departments are going to suffer. And then there's other possible, fairness lawsuits where, hey, well, we also are here and we're also athletes. That's all they also, it opens you up to Title IX violations where if you're not paying female sports, and you're not paying your women's volleyball players, your women's basketball players as much as you're going to pay football, basketball on the male side, that could be another issue. And so, yeah, there's a lot to be figured out here. And to be clear, and I don't want this to sound the wrong way, we want athletes to get compensated justly. We want them to get what they deserve. And the reality is that, yeah, for a long time, a lot of athletes have gone unpaid while there's bigwigs up at the top of conferences and up at the top of the NCAA that didn't really contribute anything except for just sitting there and saying, okay, we'll sign a paper every now and then. And they got to benefit from this massive revenue system. We care about these sports because we want our schools to win. We like to watch our schools compete for national championships at anything, right? We'll watch women's tennis if we care, right? If our team's at the top, we'll watch women's tennis. Most people probably, don't catch every single sporting event from every single, thing that their school offers. But, we'll watch this stuff because we want to watch our teams win. We want to watch the guys that went to our school win. But again, just compensation versus how schools decide to divvy this up. Do some schools just decide to forego football completely so they can dominate all the other sports, right? Are there certain schools that are going to go that way? And also, if you're a big brand school, this was the other massive concern. If you're someone like the University of Texas, for example, who's to stop you from outsourcing a lot of your NIL to your football players, and you can just spend all of your money on every other sport on your campus and not worry about it? That's going to help those big market schools that have massive exposure even more, because they're going to get a chance to say, hey, anybody in the city of Austin, do you want to pay our football players? Because we got to go pay our basketball guys and our baseball guys, and we go pay the volleyball team and soccer team and everybody else. It's going to split this in a way that I think is going to massively harm small schools. Where that ends up, and this is kind of where we landed last week, was, well, where do we end with that? Well, if some schools can't do this, they won't. And it's not to say that there'll be athletic departments going under. They'll just not be affiliated anymore. There'll be, the whole of the Sun Belt will just go unaffiliated because they'll say, hey, we can't afford to pay the NCAA what they're asking us to pay, so we're just going to play our conference over here. We'll have a championship game. We'll maybe do a tournament or something at the end of the year. Don't y'all worry about us. We're going to do our own thing. And they'll still play, and they'll still play the teams that they play every year, and they'll have a great time doing it too. They just won't play in any of the bowl games or any of the playoff games or anything like that. And so I mean, look, it's kind of a sad thing right now, but this is where we are, and all of this is just to save the NCAA from lawsuits while they kick the can down the road, and they'll probably get sued anyways.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway for me, there's a lot of unknowns right now. The gap between the haves and the have-nots is going to continue to grow. And I think
Yeah.
that the haves are perfectly fine with that. But the thing that I'm really interested in is, when do the haves start to break up amongst themselves as well? Because I don't think that it's just the G5. I don't think it's just the Sun Belt that's going to be having trouble justifying
Right.
playing ball. I think you're going to see a lot of Power 5 teams, or Power 4 now, that are at the bottoms of those leagues just kind of sitting there asking themselves, okay, is it really worth it? Is it really, are we ever really going to compete? And I think the teams at the top are going to be like, you're not. And we're tired of sharing our TV money with you. You need to skedaddle. So I don't know. Like, there's a lot of unknown right now. And I don't know that we're going to see our side of things as fans. I don't know that we're going to see drastic changes right away. I really don't think that it's gonna. We're not gonna see the ramifications of this for maybe 5 or 10 years, even as these TV deals expire and as we kind of get more clarity and the dust
Yeah.
settling from the last round of realignment. I think where you're going to see the most stuff is inside the doors of the athletic departments. Andy Staples put it this way last week on his show, kind of right after this. He basically said, like, if you work for an athletic department right now, and you cannot summarize your job in a sentence or less, you need to start getting your resume together, because you are expendable. Basically saying there's a ton of money. These schools can't be just like profitable corporations. They have to put that money somewhere. So a lot of it went to these C-suite level athletic department jobs that
Mhm.
are, the assistant athletic director of concessions and the assistant athletic director of media relations. And those are probably two that might be important, but the assistant athletic director of student athlete, imaginative AI experience or something. Just all these titles that they're probably, respectfully, very smart people that got there somehow, but they're probably not doing a lot in the day to day, and their
Mhm.
job is very high level. And we saw this at Texas A&M, right? Texas A&M, Trev Alvarez comes in within a few weeks. I think it's really obvious now to say that he knew what was coming down the pipe and just was very proactive in letting a lot of people that have been working at A&M go, working at A&M for a long time go. So
Well, and
A&M
the
was kind
Aggies
of,
also had to find a little bit of money for a certain buyout that they just
well,
purchased.
yes,
Yeah.
there's
There were
definitely
some
that.
financial issues within Texas A&M that are special amongst college football right now.
I need that drop from the TikTok kid that's like, I make bad financial decisions right now, because that's Texas A&M.
Bad financial decision right now.
But yes, coach buyouts notwithstanding, A&M was cash committed in a lot of places,
Yes.
absolutely. But I think it's fair to say that he also knew that this was coming, and he was
Yeah,
very
no, for sure.
Roberts was very proactive and let a lot of people go. A&M kind of became the poster child and kind of the, whoa, like, what are they doing? Something must be wrong over there. You're going to see that at pretty much every athletic department across the country. And not only athletic departments as a whole, like the central administration. I think the days of having 50 analysts on your staff and just hiring random fired coach to be an analyst for 2 weeks, I think those are over for pretty much
Yeah.
every single program, because they're just not going to be able to afford it anymore.
Yeah, and I think the issue here is going to be, and let's talk about the college football side of it, right? Because this is the big part that we care about on this podcast. When you think about just what's going to happen with college football, I think you're just going to see almost a return to what happened before there were scholarship limits, because again, like, you can kind of just get whoever you want to if you've got that kind of money, and if you're going to have that kind of extra cash to split around. I mean, there's going to be a lot of teams that are just going to commit to football and say, like, all right, well, the rest of y'all can figure it out. And whether that's right or not, I mean, look, that's the main revenue driving sport. That's the one that brings people in town. That's the one that, you sell the most season tickets for, you sell the most overall tickets for, gets you the most TV views, the most cash from ads, everything else. Like, you're going to sell for football more than you're going to sell for anything else. It's not close. So what's going to happen is I think you're going to see a lot of teams just kind of invest in the football side, and a lot of other sports are going to get left by the wayside. So even though, like if you're the star swimmer at your school, you think this is going to help you because you're going to finally get your split in the athletics department, it might not help you when they say, guess what? We don't care about the swim department or the swim, organization anymore. Who cares? It's just swimming, and they don't make as much money as they make for football, so I don't really care. That's not going to help you at your school. That's going to help, again, like some of the bigger brands, Texas, Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, who can afford with outside NIL to pay some of the bigger end guys and then can kick that down the chain. It's going to kind of consolidate a lot of the talent there. And then for football, you're going to be able to still pay the same amount of money as everybody else. It's just that now if you're a little bit worried about that one transfer walking out the door, you can kick him some extra cash that the NCAA gives you. So, I mean, does it kind of help? Yeah, sort of. But it's also, I think, going to incentivize some teams to bow out as much as it's going to incentivize some teams to just opt completely in, right? I could see certain teams in the SEC saying, well, I don't really care about my other departments at all. We're not really a basketball school. We're not really a baseball school. I'm going all in on football, right? I could see that happening. Whereas, I don't know, take a team like Arizona, for example, who has a really good basketball, really good baseball, and they just watch their head coach walk out the door. You might say, hey, you know what? If we're good at football, sometimes maybe that's fine with us, but we're not going to try that hard because we have so many other athletic departments that are working really well on our campus.
Yeah, I think every school, the big takeaway from this and what fans might notice is every school is going to have to decide what they want to be good at, right?
Yeah.
And to an extent, they're already deciding that because there are limited resources.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm not really scared about sports being dropped altogether because people think that there's people everywhere that think those are important. Those stay afloat already because there are donors in place that think those sports are important.
Not altogether, but massively lagging.
There might be some, but you look at Stanford a few years ago, right? Out of the pandemic, they were going to drop 20 sports or something. And then all of a sudden, a bunch of donors stepped up and you realize that all it takes is a few wealthy people that is important to them. And they want that to be their legacy or maybe their ego project. I don't know. It doesn't matter. They give the money to keep that afloat. So I'm not as concerned about that. Maybe that's a little naive, but what I am concerned about is definitely schools just deciding, we're going to have this program because we need the balance of scholarships for Title IX, but it's a shell corporation, right? We have a swimming team, but it's a redheaded stepchild on campus. I don't think that's fair to the athletes. And I think that there might be some situations that you see that. But again, if there's someone affiliated with that school that cares enough about swimming good, all it takes is a check.
Well, and you hope that would come, but it's one thing from Stanford, right, where probably the majority of your alumni are already rich anyways, and you're getting good jobs coming out of Stanford. I mean, what if you're pick any other team in the country that doesn't have as rich of an alumni base, which is, I mean, most of them, honestly, you're not gonna be able to call up as many donors, right? If you're, say Kansas State, you got some rich donors, but you don't have the same kind of money Stanford has in your alumni base. It's just not possible for that to be true. And, if you're that team, if you're that program and you're saying hey, we have to keep up, we have to find a way to keep competing, and we want to make sure basketball, football stay good and everything else, by swimming and diving, we're going to still have you for scholarship reasons, but we're not going to spend any money on facilities. We're not going to make the pool any better. We're not going to, spend money on better equipment, better training facilities, none of that stuff. You get your pool, you get to figure that out. Y'all can, train or whatever. We don't care if you win because we're trying to do that. I'm not saying Kansas State would do that, but I'm saying that's the kind of thing you can expect to see from a lot of these teams. And then, it's going to be even worse at the G5 level where money's already tighter and TV deals are already, less lucrative. That's going to happen at the G5 level where you take a team like a school like Miami, Ohio, they're going to have to go all in on football, basketball just to stay competitive in those sports and stay afloat and be relevant whatsoever and bring in any sort of value from a TV perspective. And then, who cares about baseball? Who cares about women's basketball, women's volleyball, like whatever it is, who cares about those? Because those aren't the ones everyone's watching anyways. We got to really be focused over here. That's kind of the concern is like, what does this do to the G5 level? There's going to be teams at bigger conferences, bigger schools, whatever else. They're going to be able to stay afloat. I'm nervous about what it means for the people down the chain.
Yeah, I am too. And I think it'll all work out. I think that there's a lot of fear and change, but college football, we always say it on the show, it's a sport of change. We have seen so many changes over the 150 years that the sport has existed, and the sport has survived every single one of them. Is it going to look different? Absolutely. And I think that the biggest thing football programs will see, we joke about Jimbo's salary, but I think the salary arms race and the facilities arms race in football programs, I think it's over. I think we're going to see kind of a big halt unless you already have the money committed and you've already broken ground on your facilities. It's probably what you're going to have for the next 10 or 15 years. I think that arms race and having every single bell and whistle, because again, those athletics departments, 21 to 22 million a year is not nothing. And that money was getting poured into those facility upgrades, getting athletes every little bell and whistle to get them to try to commit. I think that's over for a while, at least until the dust settles on this.
Well, and the other thing that I said last week that I want to make sure I'm, landing on a positive note is like, this doesn't mean the end of sports at your school. It just might mean the eventual end of the NCAA. Like if you're, let's say that it's the MAC, we just mentioned Miami. Like if it's the MAC and the MAC can't come up with the money to pay the NCAA, they're not going to. They're just going to go unaffiliated and they're going to play football next year anyway. They're still going to play Toledo at Miami or whatever it else, and they're going to play. Like if you have pads and a stadium and fans that want to buy tickets, you don't have to put the NCAA up on the board and have this be an officially sanctioned event. You can call it a glorified scrimmage or whatever you want to. They'll still play the games, right? Like you still have the equipment, you still have the stuff. You got people that want to watch it, so like they're going to still play. It's just about what this means for the NCAA going forward. And I think that's kind of the kicker here is as more and more of these schools and as more and more of these conferences can't keep up, they won't. They'll just drop by the wayside. They'll kind of have two parallel college footballs until eventually everyone realizes, hey, this thing's kind of rigged. It's kind of bad. Let's find a way to unite it again. And that might be where the NCAA realizes, hey, we actually don't have to exist. And they're going to come up with some new entity that can, more fairly find ways to deal with the sport than just, let's pay everybody the same number and get this lawsuit off our back.
Well, it's a developing story. We obviously won't know the implications of this or, the realities of this for quite some time. That's what we know right now. Keep it locked right here on our channel, and we will keep you updated as best we can as this story unfolds. Garrett, we're going to take one more break, and then we're back with our last segment on tonight's show, Jaden Rashada drama, part 20. We'll talk about it more next. Well, we're back for our last segment, and if you like the drama that college football brings, do we have the story for you? I'm sure you've heard the story by now, but there were some pretty big updates over the last couple of days. Now Georgia, former Florida, former Arizona State, now Georgia quarterback Jaden Rashada, the source of a lot of controversy and a lot of publicity, some positive, some negative, during his recruiting process a while back. He is suing Florida and coach Billy Napier for claiming that he was defrauded of millions of dollars in NIL. Gary, we covered this saga very thoroughly last winter when Rashada was signing with Florida. He was committed to Miami. He decommitted to Miami. He committed to Florida, and everybody knew he was getting a bag of NIL. And now in this lawsuit, we know that allegedly he was promised $13.85 million in exchange for signing with Florida. Quite the bag that Jaden was supposed to get. Only one problem. The collective at Florida failed to collect that money, failed to deliver it to Jaden, so he asked out and goes to Arizona State, starts 2 games for the Sun Devils last year before getting hurt, and then ultimately transfers to Florida's biggest in-conference rival, Georgia. Now, we pick up the story last week where Jaden Rashada's team announces a lawsuit against not only the University of Florida, but Billy Napier himself for damages, including alleging that Billy Napier broke a big rule and offered Jaden $1 million as a down payment. So I don't know where to start with this, man. Like, we've never seen this before. It's believed to be the first time ever that a player has sued a former head coach in a former program. The implications of this are really messy, and I'm sure this gets settled out of court. I'm sure this is a publicity stunt. I'm sure it's not a coincidence that this finally happens when Jaden Rashada shows up at Georgia, a big recruiting rival of Florida. But I mean, it's just been one thing after another with Jaden. I really feel for him because he's a kid. He's the kid in all this, right? He's promised all these things and no one could deliver them. And now he's just left maybe feeling like there's no other option, but to hopefully get this to play out in court.
Yeah, he was the kid in all of this. He is now a young man who has found himself in pretty deep, but I guess that's just the current college football landscape. And, if we really want to point the finger at one place, it sounds like Florida needs to get their money up, not their funny up. And so we need to figure out what was going on down there in Gatorland. So, look, I get it. Like, I couldn't probably, organize a massive thing to get $13.85 million to one, recruit coming out of high school. I probably couldn't figure that out either if I was one of these universities. I wouldn't promise that in the first place, but that's a whole separate thing. But look, I mean, this is the fact of the matter is we're putting this a little bit at a time. Go back a couple of years, or go back to, and I guess not a couple of years, but last offseason. It feels like it's forever ago, but go back to last offseason. NIL was still getting figured out, and it was pretty much the, hey, let's pay this guy. Why? Because we can. And that was kind of the attitude from a lot of people. We were coming off of the sliced bread and the, Jimbo paying his class $30 million and all that. And that probably wasn't very true, but that was the rumor. And so then guys are getting paid all this. And then we heard Quinn Ewers getting $5 million to transfer to Texas or whatever it was. And that's, oh, wow, that's crazy. And there's just rumors and speculation and everything flying around. And maybe all of it's true, right? Maybe there's a chance everything that's been said about NIL is true and that just got crazy. But at the end of the day, like, if you ain't got the money, there's going to be problems. And you can't just promise people stuff and then not pay them. That's part of this whole thing. Now, if it comes out that you're allowed to do that, where somehow you can make a promise to a kid and then say, never mind, I don't feel like it, or the collective didn't do it. So like, oh, well, I guess we'll give you this much. Maybe that'll come out in this court case and everything is fine and above board for Florida. But I mean, look, this is the problem, right? Is we knew that there were going to be some casualties from this whole thing. I think we all kind of expected that lawsuits would start to show up when schools couldn't pay players and that, some schools were going to find ways to overdo it. And it looks like it's just time for Florida to bite that bullet. And, this is the thing that I've been saying since the beginning of our podcast is this will self-regulate. All of this is going to self-regulate. NIL, transfer portal, conference realignment, everything is going to find its way to a settling point because, again, it has to. It has to find a way to stop. This will go on for a little bit, but it will stop. And you're going to see it stop once the negative repercussions start coming. Massive negative repercussion number one for Florida now, as they look to say, if they lose, they still had to find a way to pony up that much money. I'm assuming, like, if that's the number they're looking for, then that's the lost number. I'm sure they will settle on some other number because they know that they'll probably end up losing if they have a weak case. I'm sure that they will settle out of court on this one. But again, this is just some of the negative sides where now it's not so much about Florida. It's about every other coach in the country that looks at Florida and goes, well, I better make sure maybe I'll call the collective again, or maybe I'll call the donors again, or I'll call that NIL organization again. I'm going to call them twice just to make sure we have the money for this and maybe ask for them to show their work before I promise so much money to a high school kid.
Well, I think this is going to get dropped, honestly. I think it would set a dangerous precedent, and I am 100% sure that anyone, you know what? I'm not going to say 100% sure because Florida I don't know what they're doing down there. So I'm not going to give them enough credit to 100% say this, but I'm going to hope that the businessmen that were running the Gator Collective, which no longer exists, by the way, as a result of this whole fiasco they were absorbed by a successor collective and told, we don't want you running this show anymore.
You can't sue me if we quit.
Well, that's another interesting element to this.
Yeah.
And you sue an entity that doesn't exist anymore. But
Yeah.
and that's probably why Billy Napier is attached to this. But man, I don't know what they're doing down there. I would bet you that they were smart enough to put an out clause in that contract, or there's some kind of loophole that says, contingent on some sort of I don't know, like being able to get these funds together. But I mean, dude, I think this is 100% evidence that Billy Napier was not ready to run an SEC level program. I think that's at least, if we hadn't figured that out already, I think we are very well on that way. And maybe, he was pretty laid back about this when they asked him about it at the SEC meetings in Destin this week. His quote was, "I can't comment on specifics due to the litigation, but we're very confident in our legal team, very comfortable with my actions, and very appreciative of the university's support." That sounds very calm, cool, and collected. Maybe that's because he knows he might not be long for that job. I'm just speculating here. Like, there's being confident when you're Scotty Scheffler and you didn't do anything wrong. And then there's just the confidence that comes from, who cares? Like, I'm done with this job relatively soon anyways. There's a lot of incompetence going on at Florida. And again, I don't think it's a coincidence that this comes out, and this is a possibility when Georgia, when Rashada gets to Georgia. Not saying Georgia's doing anything wrong here, but it certainly helps to have one of your main regional recruiting rivals in disarray. And Napier himself even said, he's getting questions about this on the recruiting trail from both high school kids and transfers.
I mean, yeah, you probably would ask about this.
I don't know. Yeah, if you're not asking that question as a Florida recruit, you need better advice in your corner.
Like, hey, Florida's calling. Hey, did they really try to pay that kid $13.85 million?
That would be my first question to Billy and
do you have some for me?
So how do I take any promise that you're getting me?
Right.
Well, I take that at face value, and what kind of contract do I need to get you to, follow through with that?
Yeah, seriously. And I think you're onto something there. I think Napier's probably not long for his job. I think we've all looked at what Florida's schedule is and speculated on what could possibly happen this season. And we had a fun end of the podcast when we were talking about what could happen when they play Miami week 1. And we had a fun little speculation as to what could be happening to either coach that loses that game. But man, Napier, maybe after this, our prediction's a little closer to right if they got to, pin somebody with the blame for the $13 million that doesn't get paid, and then I don't know, watch him wash up somewhere else. But it's I'm obviously not hoping anything bad happens with Napier. I hope that he can succeed and lead his team to great success, and I hope that Florida can return as a brand. But also, like, what's going on at Florida is a bigger question, because their great level of success that they claim to also came from Urban Meyer. Like what are we doing with Florida when it's Urban is your coach? He's not exactly the best person. And then since then, we've wandered through like Dan Mullen being Darth Vader, and now Billy Napier's
sinks.
Yeah, like
I don't think that happened at Florida, but the same guy.
Yeah, it's the same guy. What's going on at Florida, I think, is a great question. We might need to make that a whole separate podcast of like a deep dive into the history of Florida football in the Common Era or something like that. Because, man, like it feels like Florida is the program that if they can just straighten it out, like, man, they're going to take off, right? It's Florida, right? They're down there, and it's the SEC, and they got one of the best recruiting states, and you could dominate that state if you were any good. But man, it just seems like they cannot figure out their business down there in Gatorland. So I don't know, man. I don't know what to say about this anymore. This is all just drama. And, am I sympathetic to Rashada? Yeah, kind of. Like, he's a kid that got promised a bunch of stuff. He's not supposed to know anything. But also at this point, like, I understand wanting to get your money back, but you should probably, if it were me, if I was giving him advice, I would tell him to distance yourself from that as far as you possibly can. Just go play football at Georgia. Like, don't worry about the drama. Don't try to let any of that follow you. Go play football at Georgia. Sit behind Beck for a year. learn, get better, and go be the Bulldogs quarterback and go, win some championships or something. Go get your NFL money, right? Don't let this be some off the field concern that drags down your draft stock in a couple years, or becomes this thing where everyone's afraid to talk to you and it's not his fault. I'm just saying drama follows people regardless if it's your fault or not. So I would tell him to just distance himself if that were me. But I mean, at the same time, hey, if you can make a buck, I can't fault him for trying to go make a buck off an Napier or something. So,
well,
yeah.
And the last thing I'll say is from a Florida perspective, the buyout for Billy Boy is $25.7 million.
So about double what you offered Rashada.
I'm not saying. I'm just saying the settlement might be a little bit more palpable, and then pin it on the guy that you wanted to fire. Anyways, I don't know.
Yeah, let him go handle that on his own.
Less unscrupulous things have happened in the college football world when it comes to trying to find a way out of a contract.
Go pay him his buyout and let him split it with Rashada out of court.
Well, yeah, or just pin it all on him, and you don't have to pay the buyout, and you're saving 50% there. So
there you go.
Garrett, great episode. Lots of fun things to talk about. Follow along all for the rest of the offseason. 12 more Saturdays. Make sure you're locked in. Preview season right around the corner. We're going to be breaking down every single conference really, really soon and getting you ready for the 2024 college football season. Lots of stuff off the field. We all know you're ready for stuff on the field. Follow us at 3Tech Pod on Instagram and Twitter, and do write in. Let us know what you think of the show. Let us know your questions and any comments or concerns that you might have. 3techpod@gmail.com. For that man over there, Mr. Garrett Turney, I'm Trey Reeves. We'll see you next time.
Gracious him. Howard.